The minister says, ingoma emnandi iyaphindwa. To His Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, President Paul Mashatile. To the Minister of Social Development, Minister Lindiwe Zulu. To the Minister of Social Development, Honorable Minister Lindiwe Zulu. To the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Minister Buti Manamela. To Dr. Ayodele Odusola, the resident representative of the UNDP in South Africa. To Mr. Nelson Mufu, the United Nations resident coordinator in South Africa. Ms. Ntabiseng Makata, the acting statistician general of South Africa. To Mr. Wasim Karim, the chief executive of the National Youth Development Agency. To members of the media, colleagues, and allow me to say, all protocol observed, good afternoon, Sanbonani, Dumelang, Abshen, and a very warm welcome to the launch of the South African National Human Development Report that's brought to us by the UNDP. My name is Dimpho Lecheo, and I'm very excited to be leading today's program, but I think even more than that, to hopefully engage in some really important and robust conversations about some of the recommendations that are made in this report and how we're all collectively going to put in the work to finally make a dent in the scourge and the fight against youth unemployment in South Africa. Now, this report highlights that youth unemployment in the country is a significant challenge, with rates at 61% for those aged between 14 and 24, and almost 40% for those between the ages of 25 and 34. Now, as a young South African who works in youth development, these numbers are not just concerning and alarming, they're also deeply personal, because behind the statistics, behind the quarterly labor force survey are the faces and the stories and the lived experiences of ordinary young South Africans who are talented, who have potential, and who eagerly await to contribute to the social and economic development of our country. And so I hope that as we sit here today and as we listen to the different speakers and the various contributions, we'll all begin to see ourselves as actors and ask how we can move in our spheres of influence to fight youth unemployment. Every house has its rules, and ours are pretty simple. We're just going to ask that we have the utmost respect for the speakers who will come onto the podium, that we all make sure that we have our phones on silent. I believe we all would have seen where the restrooms are, so there's no need to go over that. If you are engaging with the UNDP on social media, you can tweet them at UNDP South Africa. But since we're all here at the invitation of the UNDP, and we're here to break down this important report that they've put together, it's only fitting that the welcome and opening remarks come from the resident representative of the UNDP in South Africa. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome our very first speaker onto the stage. Please help me welcome Dr. Ayodele Odusola.
Thank you very much, the program director. This is Dimpho Lecheo. His Excellency, Mr. Sipokosa Paulos Mashatile, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Mrs. Lindiwe Zulu, Minister of Social Development, Mr. Buti Manamela, Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Ambassador Saleh Omar Abdul, the Dean of Diplomatic Corps of Eritrea to South Africa. Mr. Nelson Mofu, United Nations Resident Coordinator in South Africa. Mrs. Intabiseng Mkata, Acting Statistician General of South Africa. Professor Sarah Mosetsa, Chief Executive Officer of Human Science Research Council. My dear brother, Mr. Wasim Karim, Chief Executive Officer of the National Youth Development Agency, and also my sister, Ms. Karabo Mohale, Executive Deputy Chairperson, National Youth Development, Mesani Kala, Head of Learning and Development Academy, Balloward Equipment. Ms. Supping, Activate Change Drivers. And my dear brother, Mr. Sai Mamabolo, CEO of Independent Electoral Commission, Excellencies and members of diplomatic corps, the media, colleagues, and distinguished participants. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the launch of the latest South Africa National Human Development Report, which has been themed Harnessing the Employability of South Africa's Youth. This is the first to be produced in 20 years. I thank the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency, Mr. Sipokosa Paulos Mashatile, for taking time off from pressing matters of state to join us today. Excellencies, we are honored to have you with us on this important occasion. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank Ms. Lindiwe Zulu, the Minister of Social Development, and one of the matrons of the UN system in South Africa. And also, in absentia, Dr. Lamini Suma, Minister in the Presidencies for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, who confirmed her participation 2 weeks ago, but could not join us because of bereavement. Ambassador Saleh Omar Abdul, Dean of Diplomatic Corps in South Africa, Mr. Nelson Mofu, UN Resident Coordinator in South Africa, members of Diplomatic Corps, including the regional deans, the National Human Development Report Sounding Board members represented by Dr. Kefile Masiteng, and the Secretary of National Planning Commission, and Mr. Mwazim Karim, the CEO of NYDA. The representative of the background papers drafter, and I can see my dear brother, Dr. Pali Lehola, all our guests and UN colleagues for joining us today for this launch. And says, distinguished guests, the primary objective of UNDP's National Human Development Report is to stimulate national debates and discussion with policymakers and practitioners on pertinent development issues. In addition to this report we're launching today tries to both emphasize the need for urgent attention and implementation on the issues of youth unemployment, and to draw lessons from other countries on how they have been dealing with the paradox of jobs and experiences through the National Youth Service Scheme. The National Youth Service Scheme. The independent analysis captured in this South African National Human Development Report has been produced through a consultative process with the presidency, the government departments and agencies, youth groups, the private sector, the civil society organizations, academia, and other stakeholders. I wish to thank all experts for their valuable contributions that led to the production of this high-quality report. I want to specifically thank the Human Science Research Council for working with us to compute the Human Development Index for all the 9 provinces in South Africa between 2000 and 2020. And I want to underscore one point here. In many countries, we rarely get this kind of capacity to compute the Human Development Index without bringing people from abroad. We did it single-handedly with the Human Science Research Council. Thank you. This report has been produced as part of our contributions to the ongoing dialogue on how best to address youth unemployment and enhance human development in the years ahead. The youth unemployment rate of 62% in the country is a ticking time bomb, compared to 21% in Brazil and China and 16% in Russia. It is dangerous even when compared to other African countries, where the average is 33%. Youth unemployment is the most pressing development challenge in South Africa because tackling joblessness simultaneously addresses poverty and income inequality, as well as strengthens social cohesion and political stability. Therefore, taming joblessness is not only sound economics, it is a development imperative in South Africa. Excellencies, distinguished guests, the report has derived several interesting findings and recommendations. Let me highlight just about 5 of them. First, the South African educational system must adapt to the realities and demands of the 21st century. This will require a strategic focus on aligning school curricula to jobs and skills needed in the labor market. And it should be complemented with vigorous advocacy towards our thinking about what constitutes a job. Everybody wants to go for white-collar job, but the brown ones that yield substantial income in many advanced countries will run away from it as dirty jobs. Second, technology should be leveraged to prepare the country for the 4th industrial revolution and the future of work. Third, the high-yielding job-creating sectors like agriculture and agribusiness, tourism, logistics, services, information and communication technology, or what we refer to as industries without smokestacks, all need to be supported. Fourth, addressing youth unemployment will be most successful by taking a holistic approach, one that encompasses both supply side and demand side policies and measures. This will include improving social safety nets to the country's underserved populations and regions. And I'm so happy we have the Minister of Social Development here. Ensuring a stable macroeconomic environment, investing in public infrastructure, education and health, and existence of strong institutions. Finally, the report appreciates the contributions of expanded public work program for those not attending schools, an internship program for those in schools. Similarly, it recognizes the role of National Youth Service schemes can play in unlocking the agency of young people and providing opportunities for them to earn an income while also contributing to nation building and national unity, as is being done in Sierra Leone, Ghana, Jamaica, and Nigeria. As we speak today, the National Youth Service Scheme in Ghana produces an average of 90,000 corps members every year. And in Nigeria, it's 300,000 every year. And we sincerely believe it's going to be a game changer in South Africa. Looking at youth unemployment through the lens of human development has shown that unemployment in the country has ratio. The Human Development Index values for Gauteng is 0.735 out of 1. And Western Cape is 0.727, also out of 1, above the national average value of 0.706, while the values in other provinces are below the national value. Policy implementation must address these multiple manifestations, including putting in place favorable policy and institutional framework to ensure equity between provinces, promoting gender equality, and empowering women and girls. Policy and institutional measures that address persistent disparities between women and men in employment, in leadership and decision-making positions, and in tackling the high rate of violence against women remain critical to success in accelerating human development in South Africa. It is likewise important to continue improving good governance and enhancing institutional effectiveness in public service delivery from the national level down to the municipal level. This will help make government more accountable and responsive to the needs of our citizens. The report also underscores the importance of leveraging the private sector through public-private partnership, particularly in skill development, which is another essential strategy for fostering job creation. The report affirms that knowledge, skills, and expertise are the currencies of 21st century. Thus, continuous investment in this element is critical to success. Excellencies, distinguished guests, UNDP is walking the talk of some of these recommendations. For instance, since 2019, we have touched the lives of 27,857 youth, with 20,045 receiving skills empowerment and development training, and 7,812 of those micro, small, and medium enterprises with training in entrepreneurship, as well as linkages to markets and capital. During this period, we have placed 1,650 young people in job market. This has been possible through strategic partnership with national and international partners like Harambee on digital skills and job placement, particularly in the district development model, municipalities. The Council for Scientific and Industrial Research on low-cost internet access in rural communities. We have touched at least one community in each of the 9 provinces over the past 2 years. SALGA on support to informal enterprises, 22 ons loan on enterprise incubation, and Raise Corp on entrepreneurial skill development. Our international partners have also played an important role, including the government of Japan on automotive skills and just energy transition skills, the government of Denmark for youth on climate robotics, and the government of Germany on digital skills. I just mentioned this as just key examples of what we need to do, what we've been doing on the ground. And we have some kind of partnership with some existing universities, especially on just energy transition. The University of Johannesburg, the University of Pretoria, University of Stellenbosch, and one of the commitments that the Institute of Future of Work, Tshwane University of Technology, is to ensure that one of the recommendations of this report is put in the conference of the Future of Work, which they're going to have in November. So this is part of the initiative. More broadly, Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, UNDP stands ready to work with the government, private sector, CSO, and development partners in harnessing youth employability and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the National Development Plan 2030 in South Africa. We hope this report will foster policy debates, accelerate urgent implementation actions, and foster strong partnership to unleash the creativity and innovation of South Africa's youth. All of us in South Africa, the government, private sector, civil society organization, academia, youth and international partners must join our heads, hearts, and hands to tackle this heartbreaking crisis of youth joblessness. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ayodele Odusola. I think for giving us a very comprehensive overview of the report, the South African National Human Development Report, and I think underscoring two very important things. The fact that addressing youth unemployment is also a question of social cohesion. We proudly boast as the Rainbow Nation, as the nation that welcomes all kinds of people, as a nation that makes it work, right, despite all our diverse backgrounds. But I think for that to become a reality, we really need to make sure that every young South African is able to self-actualize and able to meaningfully contribute to the social and economic growth of our country. But I think also mentioning the importance of collaboration. I was very happy when I walked in. I've seen some colleagues from Harambee, colleagues from the NYDA, colleagues from SA Youth Mobi. And I think that just emphasizes the importance of working together to create a machinery that can effectively address this problem. During this time, we are going to hear a few messages of support endorsing this report. As you've heard, it was a collaborative effort. And the very first message that we're going to hear is from Mr. Nelson Mufu, who is the United Nations Resident Coordinator in South Africa.
Thank you, Program Director. Honorable Deputy President, His Excellency Paul Mashatile, Honorable Miss Lindiwe Zulu, Minister for Social Development, Deputy Minister of Higher Education, thank you for joining us. To you all from the government and all other ministers and government representatives in the hall, to my brother, the Dean of the Global Diplomatic Corps, and all other fellow brothers and sisters from the Diplomatic Corps present, including the Dean of the African Group of Ambassadors, who I can see in the audience, and the other regional deans as well. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a special acknowledgement to my brother, Dr. Ayodele Odusola from UNDP and the UNDP family here, as well as the rest of the UN family I can see in the audience as well. You're all welcome. And a special greetings and acknowledgement as well to our host, the Acting Statistician General of Stats SA. Permit me all to stand on existing protocol. We're all distinguished and we're all welcome. And I hope those I don't specifically mention don't feel offended. In my capacity as the United Nations Resident Coordinator and the representative of the Secretary General in South Africa, it is indeed an honor for me to join this launch of the South Africa Human Development Report 2020, which we've heard is the first since 20 years. On behalf of the entire UN family, I take it upon myself, and I'm sure with the blessings of my colleagues, to say, well done, brother, well done, UNDP. You're making the United Nations family in South Africa very happy, because not only of the pertinent analysis and recommendations contained in the report, but really it is a report that goes to the heart of what the UN in South Africa is also seeking to achieve through the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework signed with the government a few years ago. A few months ago, actually, the UN Secretary General challenged us all, and permit me to quote what he said. We need to double down on human development. We need to advance policies that invest, ensure, and innovate. Because uncertainty is costly, and for the first time, the world's total human development has declined for 2 years in a row. We must invest in global public goods, expand insurance through social safety nets, and innovate, fostering new pathways and technologies. This is vital for empowering people, especially young people, rescuing the Sustainable Development Goals, and truly shaping a better future in a world of transformation. I already mentioned the fact that it is truly gratifying that the UN Sustainable Development Framework, which we signed 2 years ago, is centered on the premise that we need to expand human capital and social transformation and ensure that we place the richness of human life at the heart of everything we have to achieve. 2023 marks 33 years since the first Human Development Report was introduced, and this brought to bear a new approach for advancing human well-being, an approach focused on people and their opportunities and choices. The founding father, actually, of the Human Development Report, Professor Amartya Sen, said, "People are the real wealth of nations." Human development, therefore, focuses on improving lives and ensuring that economic growth is people-centered, and I would dare say also planet-sensitive, because we need to be at harmony with each other and the home in which we call the Earth. This approach has led UNDP across the world to produce over 700 reports thus far in 100 countries over the last 30 years, and that's significant. And the latest report, the fourth, coming from South Africa, really focuses on the links between youth employment and human development. It highlights the fact that investing in youth is a critical priority in South Africa right now. Like I mentioned, this is not something which the UN as a family is advancing. It is also something which is at the heart of South Africa's National Development Plan, and it benefits from the highest level of political attention, as the Deputy President earlier mentioned when we were having a briefing. It is at the heart of a presidential youth employment initiative. This is all because there's a realization that in South Africa, young people between the ages of 15 and 35 make up more than half of the country's population. This means young people make up a large, resourceful, and I underline resourceful proportion of the country's population, creating a historic opportunity for a major demographic dividend. Failure to seize this opportunity and put young people first would both deny the country the potential dividend it can benefit from, and at the same time, thwart the hopes and aspirations of this large cohort. Young people, of course, suffered immeasurably due to the still unfolding but waning COVID-19 pandemic. And the report recognizes how young people were severely affected and how this crisis could really further exacerbate their worsening condition. Significant numbers have lost jobs, lost years of schooling and livelihoods on a scale that could not have been envisaged 5 years ago. The report presents the challenges youth face in South Africa. It touches on education and other well-being dimensions. It talks about the fact that there is a need, really, to harness this cohort, like I indicated, and really look at a new form or model of inclusive and effective governance that advances development that is fit for the youth. And this model has 3 pillars, and permit me to just mention briefly what these 3 pillars are and which really we welcome. It's about increasing and improving investments in the capabilities of young people, from education and health services through to housing and social services so that young people can lead a decent life while also contributing to the transformation of the country. It's about expanding the range of opportunities young people from across the world of work and also entrepreneurship can contribute towards. It's about ensuring they enjoy their rights, freedom of expression, participation, and meaningfully contributing to the political life as well of the country. It's about enhancing the role of young people also in addressing some of the socioeconomic challenges we're facing, not least in South Africa right now, the just transition to a more inclusive and decarbonized economy. And also, as mentioned, tackling and advancing social cohesion, peace, and security. In the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, we have several pillars, and let me mention just two that really link with the report. The first being the pillar 1 on inclusive, just, and sustainable growth, and the pillar 2 on human capital and social transformation, which all will benefit greatly from having young people with skills and with the ability and the rights to be able to meaningfully contribute to the socio-economic transformation of the country. I therefore echo the report's call on development partners, and I'm happy a good number of them are in the room, and the international development partners that accompany South Africa's transformation, that we all have to play our part to boost the support for young people as enablers of sustainable development, not only in South Africa, but across the African continent. Youth employment is essential because it lays durable foundations for human development and the structural transformation of the South African economy. It will be remiss if I also move towards the conclusion of my remarks without mentioning the fact that 2023 also presents us with an opportunity to review and reinvigorate our collective efforts towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. There is, in fact, a summit coming up in September at the General Assembly to focus really on our efforts towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And member states, including South Africa, have been called upon not only to engage widely across society to ensure we have a whole of society approach to achieving sustainable development, but to come with strengthened and reinforced commitments towards achieving these goals, and in the South African context, very much anchored in the National Development Plan and all the presidential initiatives which the government has, and the president has been advancing. Youth and the youth agenda really needs to be elevated across all of the Sustainable Development Goals. And this needs really to also be something that young people themselves embrace. And that's why I'm very happy that in the program and in the panels, we have a number of youth-focused entities and leaders speaking to us and reiterating their potentials and their commitments to this effort. Honorable Deputy President, let me move towards conclusion by quoting Madiba, since we happen to also be in the month of Nelson Mandela, who said, "We should not look away, we should not hesitate. We should recognize that the world is hungry for action, not words. The world wants us to act with courage and vision. Let these words remind us why it is important and why we must go beyond growth and markets to understand why young people across South Africa and the world are discontent and disillusioned, why they want to be part of bringing about change, why they want not just to be invited into spaces, but be given leadership and change-making roles, and what we collectively as leaders can do to ensure that we help them, accompany them, and benefit from them achieving their full potentials for people and planet. Thank you again, and congrats again, my brother.
Thank you for that, Mr. Nelson Mofu. Before I call on our next speaker, I am going to do one of my least favorite things as a program director and ask all of our speakers to please keep to time. We are unfortunately running a bit behind time. I'm seated right there, And so I'm going to give you a cue when you've gone over time. So if you see me waving my hand, flicking my hair, just know that it's time to wrap up. But with that said, I mentioned earlier on that when we talk about youth unemployment, it's very important to remember that we're not just talking about numbers. We're talking about people and people's lived experiences. But it is important that we have the numbers to help us make sense of the problem. That is why we are here at Isibalo House today. And so with that said, I'm going to call on to our acting statistician general in South Africa, Ms. Ntabiseng Makata, to also give us a word as she endorses this report.
Program Director, be careful. As you wave your hand, I might just disappear behind this podium, which is very easy to do, as you can see. His Excellency, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Deputy President Paul Mashatile, the UNDP resident representative in South Africa, Dr. Odusola, Minister for Social Development, Honorable Minister Lindwe Zulu, Deputy Minister for Higher Education, Science and Technology, Honorable Butimanamela, Ambassador of the State of Eritrea, who's also the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps in the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency, Mr. Omar Abdul, the UNDP Resident Coordinator, Mr. Nelson Mufu, CEO of the Human Science Research Council, Professor Muswetsa, CEO of the National Youth Development Agency, Mr. Karim, venerable members of the Diplomatic Corps present here today, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Perhaps deviating a bit from the official program of today, let me take a moment to honor and recognize our national teams that are representing our Rainbow Nation in the various sporting fields, especially those in women's sport. In particular, our Spar Proteas, who will be playing in the Netball World Cup starting tomorrow till the 6th of August. Banyana, who are currently playing at the FIFA Women's World Cup, which started last week, Thursday, the 20th of July. With them, they carry for us our hopes of a true rainbow nation, recognizing that they got to the international stage by winning through the various qualifying stages. They continuously demonstrate to us the resilience and courage of women of South Africa, despite the many challenges that they face. Siti halala to you, mighty warriors and heroines. Coming back, Program Director, to the business of today. In the same month as World Population Day, Statistics South Africa is pleased to lend its support to the launch of the South African National Human Development Report of 2022, whose theme is harnessing the employability of South Africa's youth. The theme of this report that deals with youth unemployment and the potential of the youth in our country is indeed important and relevant, as the stats demonstrate the magnitude of the issues faced by our youth. In this week alone, Status A is also taking part in activities that are aimed at mainstreaming of the demographic dividend as part of development planning through local government plans, through the district development model, as well as in planning through the national development plan at national and provincial level. The message being delivered through this engagement is that including population-related indicators in such planning is fundamental and a must-do. Equally important to note is that employment plays a central role in realizing the demographic dividend, since it is the cornerstone that drives economic growth and development. Program Director, I made reference earlier on to the World Population Day, which was celebrated on the 11th of July. This is a day celebrated globally to reflect upon population-related challenges that we face as a global and national society. The challenges are indeed many, and are a reminder to the commitments that we have made as a country at the International Conference on Population and Development, which took place in 1994 at about the same time as our democracy was born. As we acknowledge these commitments, we must endeavor to ensure that those vulnerable amongst us are not left behind. From Status A, we are committed to measuring indicators related to the youth and their employment. Allow me, in the time that you have provided me, to share a few statistics with this forum. It is a well-established fact that the results of the quarterly labor force survey indicate that the youth continue to be more vulnerable in the labor market when compared to adults. In the 10-year period between 2013 and 2023, the unemployment rate amongst the youth was consistently higher than that of the adults and increased by more than 10 percentage points. Young People Program Director also hit hard by long-term unemployment, with the most results of the quarterly labor force survey indicating that of the 4.9 million youth who were unemployed in Q1 of 2023, more than 75% of them were in long-term unemployment, meaning that they had been unemployed for a period of a year and longer. Another observation that is worth mentioning is that the graduate unemployment rate has almost doubled over a 10-year period, measured from Q1 of 2013 to Q1 of 2023, from 5.5% to 10.6%. Approximately 36.1% out of the 10.2 million young people aged 15 to 24 were not in employment, nor in education, nor in training. This is the group that we normally call the NEET. So these are our young people that are neither employed, that are neither in training, or that are neither in education. Many of us here present are probably hoping and thinking that today, as I stand here on behalf of the Statistician General, I'll also touch on when Status say, are you releasing the census? Unfortunately, the SG did not give me that mandate. But he told me to tell you this, that indeed, the results of Census 2022 shall be released in the second half of this year, which is very, very soon. I wish to thank the UNDP for their role in the compilation of the South African National Human Development Report, and we trust that the relevant stakeholders in the policy-making, planning, and implementation space will engage with it and ensure that its outcomes play a meaningful role in the development of our country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ntabiseng Makata. You see, I didn't have to flick my hair or wave. You were absolutely perfect on time. I'm now going to call on Professor Sera Musweta from the Human Sciences Research Council. I believe it was Dr. Ayodele who mentioned that the Human Sciences Research Council made it possible to conduct this report without needing to work with any international partners. So I really look forward to hearing your address. You can come onto the stage.
Program Director, I stood up very quickly just to save time. It was in no way trying to intimidate you. And Program Director, please note that in case you wave, I might just wave back. His Excellency, our Deputy President, Mr. Mashatile, the Minister, Ms. Zulu. I wasn't sure what the joke was, but it is Ms. Zulu. I always joke that the HSRC building, we have squatters in the HSRC building. Our Deputy Minister, Mr. Manamela, I want to acknowledge all of you as special guests, but we have a special friend in the room as HSRC and Dr. Odushola. You've kept us on our toes. As collaborators, I'm hoping that as I was hearing earlier on, the note that it is UNDP, the family, I'm hoping that the family has expanded and HSRC is part of that family from here on forth. This is a special moment. It's a moment to celebrate. It is also a moment to acknowledge and embrace the work that has happened here. Indeed, as HSRC, we've played our role. It was an important role. Any narrative that lacks data remains just that, the narrative. True to what we stand for, and I'm glad that our Deputy Minister is here, true to what we stand for as HSRC, we've provided that data for this report. Allow me maybe to say maybe 5 things as I start off with on why it is that we need to embrace this report, as all of us here, as South Africa, also as a continent. First is that research and evidence-based planning and implementation and monitoring, absolutely important as we measure our progress as a country, as a continent, as a global South. For there are many who are wanting to make the argument that we are a doomed continent, we are a doomed global South, we are a doomed country. This report signals a few things that we need to take into consideration. 2, that there is data, we've provided that data. Data without analysis, again, it remains just that. What pleases me about this report is that analysis has to be context specific, has to be rooted in the historical experiences of this country. For data is not apolitical. 3, I think it is also important that as you peruse this report, one of the important things about this report is that it also does what we call trend analysis. The problems of this country, the problems of youth unemployment in this country, they don't start in 1994. They certainly do not also start in 2023. And as we get into a very significant year in the life of our country next year, I'm hoping that this report is not going to be used as just cheap political arguments. Rather, we're going to engage with the data and the analysis correctly so. Because indeed, the report shows the shifts, the trends, and the opportunities. This is not a report that simply says, yeah, the challenges, and let's leave it there. It also gives us a way forward. It's a report, the 4th point is that it's also a report that does not say doom and gloom. I know there are some in the room who are expecting just doom and gloom in this report. For example, part of the data that was provided by HSRC shows that the proportion of schools having internet connectivity for administrative purposes is on the rise in this country, and that talks to how we've been thinking about education in this country. Indeed, there are disparities that I will talk to as I close. The last point that I want to make, and I've already made as my point number 5, is policy recommendation. What should be done? As someone said, especially from an HSRC point of view, our view, and this report also supports that, Our view is not just to theorize, but also to point at what also needs to be done, what is to be done. Let me talk about a few disparities that the report alludes to, the structural inequalities in this country. Yes, race, yes, gender, yes, the geographical location of our unemployed youth. But I want to also point out that those experiences of unemployment are also significantly shaped by where you come from, your class location, your class background. Because indeed, if you come from a middle-class family and you're unemployed, you still have Wi-Fi in your house. You still have electricity. I was not supposed to say anything about electricity. Let me move on very quickly. There are many other disparities, and as HSRC, we are writing our own response to the narrative, and that will come through. I want to just talk to maybe one more, which is special disparities. We are in Gauteng. Our access to electricity, our access to communication is vastly different from a young unemployed person in Xofimvaba as I speak to you today. It's important that as we do our analysis and any other policy interventions, I want to suggest that we start there. Of course, our youth are not always despondent, as sometimes my professor friends always want to portray them. They are living in the informal economy, and therefore when we talk about jobs that need to be created in the gig economy, let's make sure that those are sustainable jobs, are decent jobs, borrowing from the discussions that have happened at ILO, for example. In terms of strategies, I'm heartened to read in the analysis that entrepreneurship support is important for our youth, that they don't just want to sit ekoneni doing nothing. I'm also happy that in the report it is alluded that this is not just a government job. Public-private partnerships are important, and I'm hoping that in this room there are a few individuals from the private sector who are willing to do the right thing and not simply stash some resources somewhere. Internships are important, apprenticeships are important, and talking about apprenticeships, as HSRC, we don't just analyze and tell politicians what to do or policymakers. We don't tell them, we advise. We also have taken heed of this challenge, and our youth capacity building program is expanding, and thanks again to the Department of Higher Education through the NSF grants that we've been receiving. Finally, let me say this, that it is important that evidence-based policies are a feature of what we do in the continent and in South Africa, that data-driven insights enable the formulation of this evidence-based policies. In conclusion, I'm not looking at the program director. I'm not. In conclusion, I want maybe to state the following, that addressing the challenges of youth employment in the 21st century South Africa requires targeted strategies that consider race, gender, geographical location, and class. Equally important is the collection and analysis of data to measure human development, which plays a crucial role in identifying disparities, formulating effective policies, and fostering accountability in efforts to improve our human development. Our youth requires that. In conclusion, I want to thank the Acting Statistician General for hosting us. And I'm hoping that we are going to partner on many other things that you've mentioned today. And we are here as HSRC to fulfill our mandate. Thank you.
There are more cons than pros of being a program director. I just got the look of my life, but thank you so much for that, Professor Muswetsa. I think I need a new strategy because the speakers are not afraid of me, clearly. So instead of waving or flicking my hair, I think the guys at the back need to start playing the national anthem after 5 minutes so the speakers can sit down. No, but the speakers have been doing a brilliant job of keeping time, considering that we did begin a bit late. I'm now going to call on Mr. Wasim Karim, who's the Chief Executive Officer at the National Youth Development Agency. So much of the work of youth development sits with the agency. I know that they recently wrapped up the Youth Brick Summit in Durban and continue to do a lot of important work, especially as far as coordination is important, supporting young entrepreneurs, as well as addressing the NEET rate. So you have to find a way of wrapping all of that up in 5 minutes. All the best, and welcome to the stage, Wasim Karim.
Thank you, Program Director. You should ask the Deputy Chairperson of the NYDA there. The best strategy is to come here and stand next to the speaker when you want them to leave. Huh? Put a lot of pressure on them. So thank you very much. Let me start by recognizing His Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, the Minister for Social Development, the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, as well as Science and Innovation, the Acting Statistician General, the CEO of the HSRC, the UNDP representative, the Deputy Chairperson of the NYDA, the Ambassador for Eritrea. I also see the Ambassador for Turkey here, the CEO of the Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator, leaders of youth formations, colleagues, friends, young people. Let me take this opportunity to really welcome the report of the UNDP. We are proud as NYDA to have been a partner in producing this report. And I think what the report continues to highlight is that South Africa, and moving into the next decade, this generation will only be as strong as the opportunities that we are able to provide to young people. Yeah? Now, in responding to the report, I want to make 4 very quick points. Yeah? The first one is that it is a fallacy that South Africa has not attempted to address the unemployment and the youth unemployment question. Yeah? There is a range of programs from public employment in EPWP and CWP, the Youth Employment Tax Incentive, support to small businesses, the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, a variety of national youth service programs. So it is not true that government has not attempted at least to address the major question of unemployment that faces us in this country. But what we must acknowledge is that 14 years of uninterrupted lack of economic growth, the inability to recover from the global financial crisis, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, continues to hamper our efforts at implementing socioeconomic programs that can improve the lives of the marginalized and the vulnerable. We must, as a matter of urgency, address the constraints that hold the economy back in energy, in logistics, in transport, in digital connectivity. And with this being said, we must recognize that in doing that, there are people who continue to benefit from load shedding, from chaos at the ports and in the transport system, from high costs of data. And we have to dismantle the monopolies and the oligopolies that continue to benefit at the expense of millions of South Africans, and particularly young South Africans. Number 2 is that I want you to, for 1 second, to consider this ratio, yeah, which is 45, 45, 10. If you go around the world and you look at the global average of people who are in formal employment, 45%, who run their own small businesses, micro businesses, work in the gig economy, support the informal economy, 45%. 10% unemployed. That is if you consider and measure the whole world. Yeah? In South Africa, that ratio is 50, 10, 40. We have too few and too little small enterprises in this country. And we need to move away from the fallacy that seeks to support businesses at the top, hoping they'll trickle down to the bottom. Yeah. We must support young people who are young creatives, young artists, young farmers who want to start and scale their own enterprises. Because we will never, never be able to create the number of formal and public employment opportunities to absorb the masses of the unemployed. Number 3, last year, the NYDA, under the banner of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, took in 50,000 young people in a revitalized National Youth Service. Yeah? This makes it one of the largest National Youth Service programs, not only on the African continent, but around the world. Now, later this year, we'll share some of the outcomes that we have from that National Youth Service. But let me give you a peek into some of it. For many of those young people, we know that for the first time, it was the first time they had a bank account. It was the first time they had a job. It was the first time they cashed a paycheck. But what it came across in the monitoring and the evaluation interviews with those young people was not the money that they earned or the economics of the situation that they found themselves in. The amount of young people that said to us, the value of being in this program, the respect I get at home from my parents and my siblings, from having a seat at the table and being able to contribute something, there is value in work that is beyond just economics of work. Yeah? Which brings me to my final point. And I'm glad the Minister of Social Development is here, because there is a dichotomy that is being created in this country from policymakers which seeks to position work against grants. Yeah? And they are not diagrammatically opposed to each other. That is a false dichotomy. Yeah? Work and grants can work complementary to each other, and there's physical room in order to be able to implement both. But particularly when we are addressing the question of young people in South Africa, we need to ask ourselves the question that there is more to work than just earning an income. There is something about waking up every day and having a place to go. There is societal value that comes from having work. Yeah? And we need to ask ourselves the fundamental question, is that do we want to raise a generation of young people who have to suffer the indignity of standing in a queue at the post office every month to collect a social grant? Or do we want a society of young people who work, who feel that they are part of this democratic project that is South Africa, yeah? Who feel that they are active citizens of this democracy? It is a fundamental policy pathway that we face, and it stands right in front of us in the next few months. So, Program Director, I hope I've kept to my time. I apologize for being slightly controversial, but when we are young people, thank you very much, Kelebo.
Thank you so much, Wasim. I think in addition to being controversial, you've taken all of my notes from the podium, so I can't introduce the next speaker. Where does it end, Wasim? Where does the controversy end? Now you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you so much for that spirited contribution, Wasim, and I really hope to engage some of the points that you have raised later on in the panel discussion. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I'm going to call on the final speaker in this part of our program to do an endorsement of the report once more. His Excellency, Mr. Sila Omar Abdu. He's the Ambassador of the State of Eritrea and the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. Can we please give him a round of applause?
Thank you, Program Director. I want to assure you that I will be very, very, very brief. Your Excellency, Mr. Paul Mashatile, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Minister Lindu Zulu, Honorable Deputy Minister Mr. Manamela, Resident Representative of UNDP South Africa, Mr. Ayodele Dusola, Deputy UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Nelson Mufu, and UN country team, Acting Statistician General, Ms. Mahata, diplomatic communities, ambassadors and high commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I am honored to participate in the unveiling of the National Human Development Report 2022 for South Africa today on behalf of the Diplomatic Corps in South Africa. I believe that this report is essential and timely contribution to the national dialogue on enhancing our youth employability. There is no reasonable doubt that it holds immense importance, not only for South Africa, but also for the entire global community. As we gather here to address the pressing issue of youth unemployment and sustainable development of nations, youth unemployment presents us with formidable challenges, but it is also represents an opportunities for us to create an innovative solutions and implement transformative policies. It is a common knowledge that South Africa is not an exception, that it is confronted with the high rate of youth unemployment. This is a standing number and one that we simply cannot afford to ignore at this point in time. I acknowledge that the National Human Development Report 2022 provided us a comprehensive overview of the factors that are contributing to youth unemployment in South Africa. The report also identifies a number of policy interventions that can be implemented to address this challenge. Distinguished guests and excellencies, the study places on the need to invest in education and the development of skills is very encouraging. I am of the opinion that this is the most important factor in maximizing the potential of our younger generation and ensuring a more prosperous future for all people living in South Africa. In my opinion, in addition to making investment in education and the development of skills, the following are some additional things that may be required to increase the employability of young people in South Africa. One, promote entrepreneurship. This could include providing financial support for young entrepreneurs, offering training in entrepreneurship, and creating more opportunities young people to start their own business. Two, support innovation. This could include investing in research and development, creating more incubators and accelerators for startups, and make it easier for young people to access venture capital. Three, create a more inclusive economy. This could include tackling discrimination, providing more opportunities for young people from marginalized communities, and making it easier for young people to get the skills they need to succeed, etc. distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let us seize this opportunity, this moment, to confirm our commitment to building a brighter and more prosperous future for the youth of South Africa. Together, we can create opportunities for skills development, entrepreneurship, and job creation, ensuring that no young person is left behind. I would like to congratulate the team at the United Nations Development Agency and the other stakeholders for their work on this report. I am confident that it will be a valuable resource for policymakers, business, and civil society as we work together to address the challenge of youth unemployment in South Africa. In conclusion, I once again express my gratitude for the opportunities to be part of this auspicious occasion. May the findings and recommendations of the 2022 South Africa National Human Development Report guide us toward a more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable future. I thank you, and may the spirit of goodwill and cooperation guide us to success. I thank you.
I'm not sure if you've been seeing the short messages I get from speakers as they leave the stage. Just want to make sure I have witnesses. But thank you so much to our various speakers for giving us their messages of goodwill, and I think also highlighting to us some of the important points and recommendations that come out of this very important report. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to move on to the next segment of our program, and I think it's one that is much needed, just reading the energy in the room. We're going to watch a video. This is a short video that highlights some of the young people who are supported through the work of the UNDP. You might have heard earlier on, Dr. Ayo did mention that the UNDP walks the talk. They don't just write reports, they actually do the work through collaborations on the ground. And so this video features initiatives that the UNDP has championed to address youth unemployment and support young entrepreneurs. Between 2019 and 2030, the UNDP has supported just over 20,000 young people across the country through skills development, job placements, as well as SMME development. So we're going to cue to that video.
Okay, my name is Tolagele Noktula Makubu. I'm 26 years old. I'm an owner of Tea and Passion for Poultry from Soweto. I was supported by the 22 ounce loan and UNDP grant. I grow day-old chicks to fully grown chickens and then sell them. I started this business after I graduated from the University of Johannesburg as the country was faced by a high unemployment rate. I used to work in a very small shack that had a capacity of 300 chickens. So with the help of 22 ounce loan and the UNDP, with the grant money, I was able to build this coop, and I also bought a delivery vehicle. Per cycle, I grow to 1,200 chickens, teach more young people about agriculture. Like agriculture as a whole, it doesn't need to be poultry, it doesn't need to be livestock.
My name is Tobelani Nzama, live in Tuzomadi in KZN. I'm 24 years of age. I was part of UNDP, the Makerspace Digital Skill Program. Right now I'm working in Barros as a digital printing assistant. Mina into engiyenzayo la eBarros ukuthi ngi-assista wherever I'm needed kwi-digital printing site. So ngenze sure ukuthi i-material ikhona iduzane siprinta into right ngaso sonke isikhathi sambe senze sure ukuthi okay yonke imisebenzi esiyenzayo i-quality ayi right. Bengumuntu bengayazi i-computer like at all, only lo ukuthi kwi-computer into esiyenzayo sibuka ama-movie kuphela lapho. So in the UNDP, the Makerspace Digital Skill Program, ngafunda ukuthi ke like how to operate different softwares computer ngaso sonke isikhathi ukuthi what exactly the use of i-computer kahle kahle. So right now lokho kungisize kakhulu ekuthenini njengamanje wasengilana eBarros umshini engiwusebenzisayo udinga ukuthi ukwazi ukusebenzisa i-computer, ngeke u-operate without i-digital literacy. Ama-program afana lawa anosizo olukhulu emphakathini because ukona umuntu onjenganami like ofunayo ukuthi enze izinto but uthothi ngesimanga sokuthi akekho computer literacy, uthothi akasakwazi ukuthi akwazi ukusebenza nokufunda. Njenganami nje I had to drop out e-university because I was not computer literacy. So for me that thing like ukuthi ngithole kuleyo program la isikwazi ukungisiza because now sengingakwazi ukuthi ngikwazi ukubuyela e-university ngiqhubeke nama-studies zami. Ama-program afana lawa like because ayayikhuphula kakhulu i-youth, yabo, ayawenza umehluko eminingi emphakathini njengoba nami ewenzile umehluko kumina.
Igama Mxolisi Mbathi. I'm from NYDA here in KZN. I'm 26 years of age. I was part of the UNDP Makerspace Digital Skills Program. So what I do here at Kenyon College, I'm a facilitator for entrepreneurship. What's important about entrepreneurship, I think it should be part of the curriculum across all schools in South Africa. If you're going to look at the numbers of youth unemployment in the country, it's not going to help us to keep creating people who are going to look for employment. So that background from the UNDP Makerspace program is helping me pass the right type of information that's going to help these learners build sustainable businesses.
My name is Tepiso Sivisi. I am founder of Mori Pizza House. I am 38 years old, and I was a beneficiary of the UNDP post-COVID relief fund, which was in collaboration with 22 on Sloan. What we offer at Mori Pizza House is a pizza like no other. We make freshly made pizza in the township. We make the dough ourselves, sauces and toppings as well. I, at the time, was going through unemployment for a very long period, and thinking about what could I do to take myself out of the situation, we thought about food. Being part of the program has really made a huge difference. We're still going through quite a lot of challenges, but we were able to fix the roof. In fact, the roof was basically caving in the shop. We were able to cover the sides. There was no covering on the sides. We were able to get a few equipment as well. So we were able to pay staff at the time because of COVID. A lot of the guys that we were working with we were not able to pay up front. So there was a lot of a difference that it made for us as a small business. There are quite a few spaces where business can be incubated. I think maybe an increase in that. Just finding even more or bigger organizations that can play a part in walking with you around on the journey of entrepreneurship.
I think we can give the UNDP one more round of applause. For that fantastic work. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to call on the Honorable Minister, Minister of Social Development, Minister Lindiwe Zulu, to do remarks, as well as invite the official keynote that we'll hear from His Excellency, the Deputy President, Mr. Paul Mashatile.
Thank you very much, Program Director. And Prof, I'll tell you what the joke was when we finished the meeting. I'm sorry I can't tell it to anybody else. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm not going to kill the spirit of what we saw on the screen there, because one of the reasons why we are here as a Department of Social Development is to continue the work that we also do with the UNDP. And so thank you very much, Dr. Odusola, and thank you very much, Mr. Mufu. And thank you very much, everyone who is here, who have come to launch this South African National Human Development Report 2022. It is a very important report for us, and so I will not take much time talking about us as a Department of Social Development, because the main speaker is the Deputy President. Safe to say that as a Department of Social Development, one, we endorse the report, and number two, we are very much, as a Department of Social Development, we are very much interested in ensuring that what is in this report that is related particular to our work, we work together with the United Nations across the board, because it's not just the UNHCR, but also it's about the entire United Nations community and family here, because we believe they are there to support us. But also to thirdly indicates that as a Department of Social Development, our responsibility in the main is social protection interventions, not only for young people, but social protection generally for all. And that is why we are busy as a department looking towards finalizing and ensuring that the comprehensive social security in South Africa is finalized. But also the youth policy is of interest to us as a Department of Social Development. And when I see these young people who are taking advantage of an opportunity that's presented to them, it's of utmost importance to us, especially because we are together with SASSA at the grant, we pay the grants to many, and we look at young men and women and see that they cannot survive on the grant that they get. And I heard you talking about the 350, even if you didn't say so much as it's 350. But we want to say that we are people who can be able to work, because work is dignity. We also want to, while people are still looking for that work, they still have to live. They still have to wake up in the morning and be able to have something to eat. They still have to get into buses and taxis and everywhere to get to where they're going to look for work. And so we are here to endorse the report, and want to say to you, Dr. Odusolo, that we will work with you to make sure that what is here is implemented. And it's important because we've been working with you on a number of issues, one of which is still very exciting and important for us, is the introduction to our Department of Social Development, what we call social entrepreneurship. And I'm hoping that it will be understood for what it is and support us. Having said that, it is my honor and privilege to now present to you the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. Comrade, yes, I must say. Yes, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Paulos Mashatile. Thank you very much. You are welcome, DP. It's your opportunity now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Thank you very much, Comrade Lindiwe Zulu. I want to start by acknowledging our ministers, Minister Lindiwe Zulu, Social Development. Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma could not join us. She has bereavement in the family. Let me also acknowledge Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Deputy Manamela. the United Nations Resident Coordinator in South Africa, Mr. Nelson Mufu, Resident Representative of the UNDP in South Africa, Dr. Yodele Odusola, Executive Deputy Chairperson of the National Youth Agency, Ms. Karabo Mohale, Acting Statistician General of South Africa. I normally call it the acting the SG. The Statistician General is a long word, so I usually say SG. So acting SG, Ms. Ntabiseng Makata, Chief Executive Officer of the Human Sciences Research Council, Professor Sarah Musweza, Mr. Wasim Karim, National Youth Development Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, and all the youth of South Africa, good afternoon. I would like to thank the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, for inviting us to the launch of the South African National Human Development Report 2022 under the theme Harnessing the Employability of South Africa's Youth. We would like to commend the UNDP and its partners for undertaking the research and producing this timely report. Hopefully, the report will shine the light on blind spots on the work we are doing to develop the youth of our country. To this end, we endorse the 5 strategic areas recommended in the report, and namely, the urgent prioritization of public sector investment in education and skills development, as well as scaling up initiatives that harness youth participation in the economy. Second, the development of one-stop job services that consolidate existing tools and services. Third, the necessity for the expansion of youth entrepreneurship in technology-based and green industries. Fourth, building on the shifting gender norms to achieve greater women's economic empowerment. And lastly but not least, strengthening and expanding the National Youth Service to bridge the school-to-work gap. Program Director, we agree with the UNDP when they say there is no doubt that the high unemployment rate is a ticking time bomb. Accordingly, in addressing youth unemployment, the country will simultaneously address poverty and income equality. Addressing and tackling youth joblessness is not only sound economics, but it's a development or developmental imperative. For its part, our government is pursuing several youth empowerment programs. In 2018, the government launched the Youth Employment Service Program, which is part of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention and aims to combat youth unemployment. A collaboration effort between government, business, and labor, the program has now placed over 1,000 young people in employment. This is concrete evidence of how far we can go when we work together. We need to be, more needs to be done to benefit as many young people as possible. As part of the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program, the government also launched the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. And since 2020, the initiative has made significant progress in addressing the difficulty of transitioning youth from learning to earning. Despite its 3-year existence, more than 4 million youth have joined the network. To respond to employers' requirements for work experience, which first-time entrants into labor market do not possess, obviously, the government has also launched the Public Service Graduate Internship and Learnership Program, which provides interns with the necessary work experience. We were talking particularly about this program when I arrived, because of the challenge that we all know have been existing for many years, where when young people leave universities and colleges to try and get work, they are asked for experience. Do you have 3 years experience, 4 years experience, which obviously they did not have. So these programs will help with that. Program Director, yet another initiative is what we call the National Rural Youth Service Corps Program, which trains young people in areas such as leadership, community service, and interpersonal communication. Cumulatively, these initiatives should impact positively on molding young people into responsible members of society who appreciate the relationship between their rights and their responsibilities to society, in as much as they assist them in acquiring occupational skills necessary to access livelihood opportunities. Evidently, the challenge is not one of lack of programs. It is one about the effectiveness, acceleration, and massification of our programs. In doing so, we'll also have to address leakages throughout the public policy system. For example, the report we are launching found that those without a matric qualification make up a significant proportion of the youth employment rate at around 40%, in contrast with only 13% of graduates who are unemployed. However, the Development Bank of Southern Africa also found that there is a discrepancy between employers' needs and the skills of the youth entering the labor force. Paradoxically, many graduates are doing manual jobs that are not in any form linked to their degrees due to the unavailability of opportunities in their chosen field of study. Among other things, this means that we should return to the youth lens adopted by the drafters of the National Development Plan. It is worth recalling that amongst other interventions, the NDP called for the following: the accelerated improvement of the quality of education, skills development, and innovation, strengthening of youth service programs, and the introduction of new community-based programs to offer young people life skills training, entrepreneurial training, and opportunities to participate in community development programs. Strengthening and expanding the number of FET colleges to increase the participation rate to about 25%. Increasing the graduation rate of FET colleges to 75%. A tax incentive to employers to reduce the initial cost of hiring young labor market entrants, a subsidy to the placement sector to identify, prepare, and place matric graduates into work. And lastly, expanding the role of state-owned enterprises in training artisans and technical professionals. Program Director, we seek to understand the factors that lead to dropouts throughout the schooling system. Implicit in this fact is a deficit of skills and exposure for the young person who does not possess a matric. This means that our intervention has to be more specific and targeted, take into account the urban-rural divide, take into account race, gender, and the availability of opportunities. Work also needs to be undertaken by all the social partners to examine the quality of the tuition in FET colleges, the better to derive maximum benefits to the enormous public resources we are expending into this important sector. None of us need tutelage about the importance of skills development. To illustrate the point, in the 3 days from September the 12th to the 15th, South Africa will host the BRICS Future Skills Challenge, in which young people from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, of course, will compete to show solution to the 21st century's most pressing challenges. The skills in question are in the following areas: aircraft maintenance, agri, IoT, building information modeling, cyber security, data science, digital twin, drones, internet marketing, manufacturing, robotics, mobile app development, renewable energy, and robotic process automation. In conclusion, Program Director, it goes without saying that to compete amongst the BRICS nations and the world on a sustained and sustainable basis, we cannot but empower the youth with the wherewithal to acquire the skills of the 21st century. It is in this context that the expression, a country that does not value its youth does not deserve its future, makes full meaning. And finally, it is also obvious that the government's effort to empower young people must be premised on a growing and inclusive economy. This is why it is crucial that the social partners all act in unison about reindustrializing and growing our economy. Program Director, we look forward to studying the report in detail to gain insights into the work that is gone into this report, but most importantly, proposals that seeks to empower young people. I therefore, as I sit down, want to say on behalf of the South African government, we endorse this report, and we are looking forward to working with you. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. Before you take your seat, I am going to invite you back onto the stage for a picture, I believe, of the official handing over of the South African National Human Development Report 2022. On stage. Oh. You know, I think I need to stop making a habit of leaving my notes on the podium because they've gone missing once again. And this time, I suspect the Deputy President, Minister Lindiwe Zulu, someone has taken my notes. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on. Thank you. We're going to move swiftly along, and I'm going to call on the next speaker, but as well as our panelists for the panel discussion at the same time in the interest of saving time. And so while we call on Mr. Roger Sidliwayo, who is the economics advisor at the UNDP country office in South Africa, I'm also going to ask Mr. Dumisani Gala, who is the head of learning and development at Bala World, to please also silently make his way onto the stage and take a seat. Ms. Karabo Mohale, the executive deputy chairperson at the NYDA. Ms. Tebogo Suping from Activate Change Drivers, as well as the Honorable Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Mr. Buti Manamela. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Program Director, Your Excellency, Mr. Paul Mashatile, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, ministers here present, UN Resident Coordinator in South Africa, UNDP Resident Representative, members of the Diplomatic Corps, comrades and friends, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. You see, I always want to greet people as comrades and friends because where I come from, we always, if you are part of us, we say you are comrade. And if you are not part of us, you are not a comrade. So sometimes people used to ask me, how come your name, all your names in Zimbabwe, you always have CDE? What is it? So I say, no, it means you are a comrade. You are part of the struggle. So, you know, I want to start with saying something. And this is quite important to contextualize what motivated us to do this Human Development Report 2022, Harnessing Youth for harnessing the employability of South African youth. You know, by training, I'm an econometrician, and I became a development economist by accident. You know, econometricians like modeling, and sometimes when we do modeling, we always we always assume that these things will happen. But when I became a development economist by accident, I realized that development is much more complex. It's about people. It's about how we expand people's choices and even increase their agency. And what inspired us to do this report is really this challenge which we have in South Africa. And it's not only a challenge in South Africa. Even the African continent has got this challenge of youth unemployment. And I would like to put a human story to this South African story. And this was actually a report on South African news show reporting a youth in South Africa during the height of COVID. Allow me to quote, "We as the youth of today don't see the freedom that those youth of 1976 fought for. We still have too much unemployment. If we can't see everything coming to the youth, better jobs, employment rate coming down, then I would say that June 16, what we fought for, what we can actually see it. But we don't have jobs. Each and every day, you have to sell something so that we have something to eat. You have to have a proper job to have something to put on the table to eat." So this is the South African story of the youth. And what that story tells us is actually that South Africa youth unemployment is the defining challenge of South Africa. That youth joblessness represents the generation and moral tragedy. And youth unemployment means youth losses and forgone opportunities. It deprives the country of creativity and innovative capabilities of the youth. And we know that youth employment is the best accelerator for human development and the SDGs. So this means that it's critical that we tackle this youth unemployment. And also, youth are best suited for capturing the demographic dividend and the dynamism of the Industrial Revolution. Actually, the youth are the safe bet for South Africa to achieve NDP 2030. So that story, which I alluded to, is really what inspired us to really look at youth unemployment in South Africa through a human development lens. And that human development lens actually argues that human development is about opportunities, and youth employment is key to human development in South Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to highlight what are the key messages of the report. I won't mention all of them because most of them have already been elaborated by the previous speakers. But just allow me to highlight a few things. One key message from the report is that even though South Africa faces these triple development challenges of high inequality, high poverty, and unemployment, South Africa has got a vision, the commitment, and the capability to overcome youth employment. I think South Africa has made an immense transition to democracy, immense investment in infrastructure and institutions, and a good advancement of human development. You heard the figures which the resident coordinator actually quoted. It's actually close to 1, which is the highest human development index. So, and also South Africa has entered a demographic dividend. And I think COVID is really an opportunity for South Africa. There is a saying that never waste a crisis. We have seen industries which we used not to think that they are tradable sectors, agro-value chains, ICT, logistics, and so on, which are now called industries without smokestacks. And we have seen the youth doing quite a lot there. And some studies which have been done have actually shown that these industries are much more resilient than the standard industries which the East Asian tigers grew from for manufacturing and so on. That you can actually grow out of these industries without smokestacks. So COVID is actually an opportunity, but of course, to reap that opportunity, you need to invest in infrastructure to make sure you address the logistic challenges and so on. I think I'm glad that the Minister of Social Development is here. I think some of the things which we need to look at, how can we fine-tune the social grant system to actually change behavior, to actually support, to even make sure that it change even job-seeking behavior, and even to try to be innovative in terms of these social grants, because we all know that how the way South Africa planning was done, most of the areas where these youth can find jobs, they are very far away from where they live, and transport costs are a huge bottleneck. Also, data costs are very high. How can we not fine-tune that social protection system so that we give these youth transport vouchers, even digital vouchers, so that we actually address that bottleneck so that they can go and look for jobs? I think those are some of the things which we need to be innovative to take advantage of this social grant system, which actually, if you compare with other emerging markets, South Africa actually spends quite a lot on social grants. But how can we fine-tune it that it makes our youth even venture out to look for jobs? Because there are studies which have been seen, which have been done even here in South Africa, which have shown that youth in families where the elders receive this elder grant, these elders end up giving this youth money from Johannesburg to KwaZulu-Natal, wherever, to come to Johannesburg to look for jobs. So you can see how transport costs can actually be a bottleneck to these youth. Another key message is this issue of to tackle the high and complex youth employment issues and to take advantage of the opportunity of the future of work. South Africa has got to invest in 20th century skills for its young generation. And we all know what these skills are. It's these soft skills, the hard skills, teamwork, and so on. And I think South Africa really needs to actually make sure that these skills are even inculcated at an early stage in the education system so that we prepare our youth for 21st century skills. And of course, we know the fourth industrial revolution is here, AI and so on. And of course, there are opportunities there which our youth can seize. And for them to seize that, we need to invest in infrastructure, skills development, and policy development. But of course, there are also other issues to ensure that we address some harmful effects that fourth industrial revolution and even AI will entail. So I think legislation, we need to have some safeguards so that even making sure that other people who are harmed are not left behind in the process. And of course, this report comes up with a lot of experiences from other countries in terms of macroeconomic policies. How can we make sure that our macroeconomic policies address the issue of jobs? That macroeconomic policy really put job creation at the center, active labor markets, sectorial policies, and so on, and also institutional support for entrepreneurs, particularly women. And I think when we talk of youth, addressing the challenges of youth unemployment, we should always, the youth are heterogeneous. There are some youth who want to get jobs. So we need to cater for those. There are youth who want to be entrepreneurs. How do we address those youth? And what I'm trying to say there is no single point solution to really address the challenges which youth faces. Last but not least, I think what the report says is we need a five-pronged approach to really address the issues of youth and youth employment. One of it is a strategic approach to youth transition pathways to sustainable livelihoods. The second one is strategies for creating and seizing opportunities and demographic dividend. The third one is capturing new world of work opportunities, and also the strategy for national youth service and strategies for creating alliances among different actors. We need this social compact to really address this development challenge. As it has been highlighted, this is a time bomb, and we really need this agency to really address this challenge. With these few remarks, let me thank you And I want to end by saying, this is our future, and let's make it work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Rogers Liwayo. And ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for us to get into our panel discussion. We've heard many, many things about this report. And so today's discussion really looks at how do we take the recommendations made in the South African National Human Development Report and maybe add on to them, because as Wasim mentioned, there is a lot of work that is currently being done to address the issue of youth unemployment. And so it's a matter of really looking for those key partnerships and collaborations to weave some of those recommendations into what is already being done. I'm going to reintroduce my panelists just one more time. We are joined by Mr. Dumsani Kala, who's the Head of Learning and Development at Bala World. We're joined by the Honorable Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Mr. Butima Namela, the Executive Deputy Chairperson of the NYDA, Ms. Karabo Mohale, and last but certainly not least, Ms. Deboho Suping from Activate Change Drivers. Thank you so much for joining us. We were meant to have a Q&A session post this discussion, but we simply do not have time. And in the absence of my notes, I'm going to rely on all of us collectively to drive today's discussion. And so I look forward to weaving some questions and contributions into the discussion that will be happening here on stage. But I think that when we talk about youth unemployment, it is such a complicated and layered discussion to have. And so it can be very difficult to have a starting point. My notes. Thank you. I will deal with the perpetrator after, after the discussion. None other than Minister Lindiwe Zulu. It's a very difficult one to have, and to have the conversation in a way that it has an impact, right? That we leave feeling like we have solutions, and if we don't have solutions, to at least leaving the room feeling like we can go and ask better questions. And so today I want us to focus on policy interventions. I'd like for us to look at the role of public employment programs, and I also want us to focus on education and development as it pertains to youth unemployment in the country. And I think I'm going to start with the Deputy Minister. We heard quite a bit about the importance of relevant policy interventions, right? And in South Africa, we've had quite a few from the broader RDP, Reconstruction Development Program. There was GEAR, most recently the NDP, the National Development Plan. And we also have the National Youth Policy, which focuses specifically on the needs of young people. I'd like to know from you, do you think that from a policy perspective, we've reached a place where we have the right instruments to adequately address the issue of youth unemployment?
I definitely think we have. And of course, policy is not stagnant. If you take it from the National Development Plan, as part of the intervention, the President announced the Economic Recovery Plan, which was mostly meant to respond to the challenges that we're facing as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we did from the Department of Higher Education and Training was to look at that plan and look at what the economic drivers would be and look at what the skills demands would be in response to that. And I think there are also a whole range of interventions which are meant to support existing policies, such as the scarce skills list that the minister announces on an annual basis. And I think the fact that we have made such significant progress in terms of growing the technical vocational education and training sector, and also the university sector, and the attention that we paying in terms of community colleges and the work that our sector education and training authorities are doing. is testament to the fact that the policy instruments which proposed, all the structures are in place. One of the things which I've noted in the report is the fact that we need to legislate and commit governments in terms of almost the right to work. I don't know to what extent will that be helpful. If you say, well, there is, I think there are policy and constitutional provision, that everyone has the right to work and so on and so forth. But as to how that can be, practicalized if you make it a legislative obligation of state institutions to ensure that there's work for everyone. Otherwise you will, instead of focusing on growing the economy and creating work, you'll be focusing on litigation because people will be suing you for not providing, work. But in terms of overall policy, I'm of the view that I think we have, quite progressive policies, and also the rolling out and implementation of those policies has been working quite well. One of the things which I think came out from the Deputy President and a couple of the speakers was, the question of unemployed graduates. And I mean, since 1994, it has been ranging between anything between 3 and 10%, with the current rate being the highest. And obviously because, you just emerged from a pandemic and, a global economic crisis, which basically compounded the problem. But the fact that we had over the years stabilized graduate unemployment, at anything between 3 and 6%, and that it shot up as a result of the global economic crisis and the pandemic, means that our higher education institutions are providing the necessary skills to the economy, and that's why there is that high absorption rate. Of course, we need to do more. Of course, we need to, make sure that every young person has a skill, because I think for me that's important. And a skill not only to be able to do something, not only to be able to bake or to make your own chicks, like the lady there, but also the entrepreneurial skills. Many South Africans, and I think also all over the world, we have somewhat privileged universities. We believe in sending our kids to universities because we believe TVET colleges are for those who are intellectually less astute. But I think that we need to appreciate the fact that with the changing world of work, and with the redefinition of what work means, it is no longer helpful to just prioritize sending kids to universities. TVET colleges are the future. If we really to skill young people, get them involved into entrepreneurial initiatives, and increase their possibility and opportunity for employment.
Thank you for that, Deputy Minister. And just before we continue with the rest of our discussion, the rules that apply to our speakers about the wave apply to the panel discussion as well.
Wink, I thought you were saying I should go on.
But I think you make really interesting points, Deputy Minister, when you mention that policy is not stagnant and that we constantly need interventions to support policy implementation. I know that as a country, we get a lot of criticism about having brilliant policies and designing brilliant interventions, but fall short when it comes to implementation. And on the issue of TVETs, I think, TVET colleges are definitely a game changer when it comes to the employability of young people, but there has to be a pipeline, right? There has to be some kind of partnership and collaboration between TVETs and corporates. Karabo, I want to bring you into the conversation now. Part of the work that the NYDA is responsible for is coordinating youth development activities while we're still on the issue of policy, right? And in your view, do you think that we have developed a strong and capable enough youth machinery to coordinate all of the activities that we have been speaking about today in such a way that we can actually make a dent in the youth unemployment numbers?
Thank you very much, Program Director, and allow me to greet the esteemed honorables and Excellency, the Deputy President, the Minister, and the Deputy Minister. It's a very difficult question, but we always say that we have a challenge of working in silos, especially in government, but as well as in the private sector. So you do have strong policies and interventions that have been put in place. But because everybody's doing something small in their own different department or their own different industry, we really do not have an overall appreciation of the dent that we're making collectively as a country. But I think I just want to reflect on something important that the report speaks on, and it foregrounds some of intervention on the fact that you cannot be able to speak about youth unemployability if you do not reflect on the colonial disposition of those young people. When you speak about the cost of looking or searching for a job in South Africa, on average is around 1,000 rand. So you might be doing work as the NYDA, but a young person who's sitting in Hamadipan who does not have access to Wi-Fi, does not have access to this information, does not know the work that government does. What then does that do? It leaves those who are already in peripheral areas from economic activity confined to those particular environments. And those that have got access to this information and have got access to these institutions who are in predominantly urban areas, they are the ones that actually have access to this information. And perhaps the conversation we need to start having is how do we bring young people who are in peripheral economic activity to participate in the economy of South Africa? This then means that we need to be able to challenge industry, we need to be able to challenge the private sector to say, as and when you are advertising jobs, have you ever thought on going on roadshows to recruit young people who are sitting in rural areas? It's always well and good to say, no, but we've created 1,000 jobs, but who exactly is accessing those 1,000 jobs, and how do they actually change the material socio-economic conditions of the most disenfranchised and vulnerable young people in South Africa?
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Garabo. And I think you're speaking about, number one, finding young people where they are and not expecting young people to then uproot their lives, right, in pursuit for economic participation, but also making sure that we prioritize the lived experiences of young people when we create interventions and when we create employment opportunities. And so I want to bring Musuping from Activate now into the conversation. When we speak about designing interventions with young people in mind and making sure that we find young people where they are, how important is it that young people are a part of these policy and decision-making processes? That when we design and we think about the programs that are meant to address things like skills development, things like entrepreneurship development, that we're not designing for young people, but we're designing with them.
That's a very layered question. I do want to say, though, that youth employability is not just a jobs issue. We really have to sit and think consideratively about the substantive, the systemic, and the structural impediments that serve as a hindrance to young people's development, not only their ability to gain access to work, but also what that enables them to do. I think we've mentioned from one speaker after the next, we do not have a shortage of programs in this country. What we do have a shortage of in this country is meaningful programs that serve to do justice to young people. We really need to reevaluate the curriculum that we offer to young people. Does it really enable young people to participate in jobs for the future, whether as a job seeker or as a job creator? My answer is no. If I look at the appalling 30% benchmark that we set for young people who we want and expect to compete with the best in the world, my answer is no. If I look at the programs of mass production that the country is creating that will account for 5 million young people to be deemed as employed in EPWP programs that do not meet the benchmarks of minimum wage, my answer is no. And so for me, what this program does provide is to say, how do we re-evaluate and look backwards? because a young person is not made up of an individual who just seeks work, but somebody who has the ability to thrive and give of themselves to the development of the agendas of South Africa and its economy.
Thank you for that. And I think reminding us, Tebogo, that it's not just about creating the employment opportunity, but we really also have the job of interrogating the quality of those jobs and to what extent those jobs actually give young people an opportunity of upward mobility, right? So thank you for that contribution. And then Mr. Dumsani Kala, I want to bring you into the conversation now, and I'd like for you to reflect on something that Minister Manamela mentioned about the progress that we have made and about, I think, the quality of our learning institutions and the fact that they've really been able to position young people well for employability in our economy. You head learning and development and Balo World. And first of all, I'd like to know, is this the case? Has this been the case in your experience? Because often there is a difference between policy and reality. So is this what you're seeing from the young people you work with on the program? And if not, and if there is a mismatch, where do you think we are missing the mark?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to represent Balo World. I fully agree with the speakers that we have world-class progressive policies. And Balo World is very committed in executing the acceleration and implementation of these policies. And I'll share the story why I'm saying that Balo World is very committed and is progressive in accelerating the implementation of those policies. One policy that government has been driving is transformation. As we speak, Balo World board, 55% of its representation is women. If you look at the executives in Balo World, 67% are blacks. Of that 67%, 43% are women. You talk about AIC representation, we're sitting at over 80%. So we have a board that really is deliberate about the execution of the government policies. And we have vehicles that we use to drive the policies of the government. The report suggests that we need to address the inequalities, we need to address the poverty, we need to address the poverty and joblessness. And this is what Balo World is doing. In terms of inequality, the board of Balo World adopted a new living wage policy. There's no employee in Balo World that is earning less than 100,000 because we believe it's the right thing to do.
Repeat that number. There's no employee at Balo World who's earning less than?
100,000 per annum.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Just making sure.
Yes, yeah. And when we look about driving joblessness, no, Deputy Minister. So when we look at really, driving the SME growth in the country, we have vehicles that, drive that. One, we have Siakula, Balo World Siakula, is focusing on, supporting capacity building and financial capacity for SMEs to thrive in their own businesses. We do that. And we do financial and non-financial. And then the financial, it can be a grant or it can be an interest-free loan. And because we know that what kills many small enterprises is cash flow, we even in certain SMEs that we partner with, we give them a holiday payment of their grants and loans for about 6 months so that they can build up their cash flow. So there's many stories that I can tell to attest to the commitment of Balo World in the government are good policies. All we need is the hearts and hands to implement them. On the skills development, Balo World is partnering with World Skills SA, which is under Department of Education and Training. We prepared 2 South African technicians that participated in Austria World Skills competition as Balo World. Department of Higher Education funded 1 because they wanted to send 1. We funded the 2nd technician. We prepared this technician for that competition. These are the partnership that we are committed to as Balo World. We also have memorandum of understanding with TVET colleges to address the quality of education in TVET colleges. We host lecturers from these TVET colleges at our academy in Isando to improve the quality of our lecturers in the colleges.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Dumsani. I think what all of the speakers have really said is the work is being done, and we just need to find ways of centralizing it, and I think keeping track of the impact that we're making, as Ukarabo mentioned. Karabo, before I take hands from the audience, I'm going to bring you in once again. One of the programs that the report singles out is the National Youth Services Program that is run by the National Youth Development Agency. I think for the benefit of those in the room who may not know about the program, just briefly explain exactly how it works for us, and I think maybe speak to why it's important to make sure that we legislate, right, the programs that have proven to work, so that tomorrow in 5 years when there's another NYDA board, the NYS is not scrapped, even though it has been proven to make an impact in the lives of young people.
Thank you very much. The CEO is very passionate about the National Youth Service. His opening line is always, one of the largest national youth services on the African continent. And predominantly, it's us building a cohort of patriotic young people who give back to South Africa through community service. And this work is paid work. So we identify different NGOs that we work with and different institutions that do this type of work. I think this is what we're mentioning, that young people in rural communities do not have an opportunity to particularly participate in critical sectors of the economy. Now, the National Youth Service actually goes into those communities and gets young people involved, whether it is in cannabis, whether it is in the oceans economy, whether it is in the arts. That's what the National Youth Service does. And we really want to call on different stakeholders to partner with us so that we can be able to have an even larger footprint and potentially move to having 500,000 young people that participate in the National Youth Service.
Brilliant. I'm going to open up the floor before we move into the second segment of our conversation. I know that there's been a lot of activity happening on stage, but we do not want to speak to ourselves. And so I think we have a roving mic that's ready. I'm going to take just a couple of hands. Any questions and contributions from the audience? There's one hand on that side. There's another hand up there. I think we have just a bit of time, so we can take a third hand, preferably a woman this time. Oh, there's a lady in the green over there. So we'll take this hand, the gentleman in the blue, and then the lady in the green to wrap up.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone, and special acknowledgement to the Deputy President, the Minister, and everybody, all protocol observed. My name is Ntlan Tlapo. I'm a ward councillor. I just want to say a few things in terms of what we've been discussing in terms of the youth unemployment and the report. Firstly, we need to go back to basic. The reason why for that, a very simple thing. Let me start by talking about the NDP. With regards to NDP, it's only at the national spheres. You will not find it at local, because it looks like it's only talking to national. at the local level, you'll have a problem finding it, which gives you the examples of, one, the issues of what the lady from the NYDA spoke about, to say you've got people that will not know about their programs. Firstly, one, we've got municipalities. If we take NYDA programs to municipalities, in municipalities, we've got ward committees and youth representatives that can assist in making sure that your services are in all basic wards, so that it's easy for everybody to access. Nobody will ever need transport to go outside because everything will be within their working space and within their ward. So that will make things very easy for young people. And people will start understanding that there is NYDA, there is Harambee, there is SA Youth, so that that assists the community. With issues of skills development, issues that the Deputy Minister spoke about, the issues of skills development, we need to find ways to measure or to have tools to say, how many are we targeting, so that we are able to know. We must not just talk about it, but we cannot measure, because that's the problem also with NYDA. Whenever you call them, they come to your community, they can never show you a person that has benefited, which it becomes a problem when it's like that. That's why it's important, let's take it down to the basic units of our community. That will assist us a lot. In terms of the programs, we do have programs, but as I've just said, Debs also has touched on it there, we do not have programs that are able to speak to the heart of young people in the country. That's where the problem is at. But it's only accessed by those who've got access to only national doors. So let's bring it down to local and to wards so that everybody can have access to all of these things. So I think if we can do that, in municipalities, there are infrastructures. Let's not say we'll not have a problem, we'll have a problem of infrastructure in terms of NYDA and Harambee. There are already systems and infrastructure in municipalities. In ward offices, as long as we have these young people who are youth representative in the ward committees, if we give them those access to be able to speak to young people directly, one person taking everything and assisting young people to apply, and we can be able to assist that one young person if he needs to drive or he needs to take a taxi to go and submit for all those young people of the actual ward. That's what we need to do. If we can go back to basics, then we should be able to achieve. And our programs will be felt by young people, because then they will not need to wait for one Christmas day that will come when Harambee or NYDA comes to the ward. They will be able to interact with it every day. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. Good evening. My name is Edward Gumbo. I am from Simolahong Digital Innovation Precinct, as well as Vets Entrepreneurship Clinic at Vets University. I have a simple question. It's not a comment. It's a question regarding when we talk about entrepreneurship, many of the programs are looking at incubation and acceleration. There is a challenge when you look at right at the early stage, at ideation, at conceptualization, where we've got young people, we've got ideas. Those ideas need to be nursed and nurtured. What we see even at university is we've got these young people, they have a safe space within the university because they have access to data. But when they leave the university ecosystem and environment, they have no access to connectivity. Yes, as a country, we have high internet penetration, but the reality is, it's actually too expensive. When you go to rural areas, even the fiber to home is non-existent because it will be too expensive for the private service providers to actually pull the fibers right into all households in the rural communities. So the other question that I'll throw, sorry, Deputy Minister, you are the one in front there, to say, what is our strategy regarding making internet available to those places that are seen as remote? For example, satellite internet, that's one of them. Because when we want to talk about digital entrepreneurship, it's all about connectivity. Let the young people have access. Let them be connected for them to experiment, test before invest, before they qualify to the incubation and acceleration programs, because currently they don't qualify. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the Deputy President, to the ministers, and everyone that is here. My name is Mamkabela Tamaram Tembu, and I represent the Youth Policy Committee. I have one simple question that I'm going to pose, and then hereinafter I'm going to give a background to my question. And my question is, with all the programs that we have in place to try and curb the problem and the issue of youth unemployment, how do these programs engage with the dignity that is compromised of the youth? The reason as to why I ask this is because the youth of South Africa are challenged with difficult decisions. One of them being, should I use this money to go buy bread because there's nothing at home? Or should I use it to go and buy data in order to make a CV, in order to apply? The question and the background that I've posed to you is one that tells you that human dignity of the youth force that we're trying to capacitate, that we're trying to, upskill, is compromised because of the situation at home, because of the fact that we need to realize that we cannot build a strong youth that is employed if they are hungry, if they cannot take care of their hygiene. And so I appreciate the fact that these programs have these strategies and have all of these tools put in place, but what do these programs do to try and deal with the dignity of the youth? Because a dignified person cannot produce any results. And so that's the question that I pose to all the stakeholders today. And I really hope that in talking about this, this conversation does not stop here, but then it extends beyond these conversations, and that we actually, take into consideration the human dignity of the youth force that we're trying to capacitate. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for those questions. I think, when I listened, I actually thought that the best panelist to take all three of them would be you, Minister. But I'm going to try and exercise some equality. And so, Karabo, I'm going to ask you to please, yes, I think you can take on the question about localizing the national programs of the NYDA and working in collaboration with municipalities. And then I think there was a question around dignity, which is so important and speaks to, I think, what Uwasim mentioned, the fact that something like grants and jobs do not have to work against one another, right? Because while young people are on the path to looking for work, they still need to live dignified lives. So I think you can also have a go at that one. And then, Minister, the question about digital access and how do we ensure that we provide more support for young entrepreneurs who are just starting and just want to start out their idea. So, Karabo, we can hear from you, and then we'll wrap up with the Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much. I'm always very excited when there is a question or comment around the visibility of the NYDA, because it assists us to build our business case. In our investment roundtable, we said to the Deputy President that in order for the NYDA to be more impactful and more visible, we actually need more funding. So you cannot be able to respond to the basic units, which is wards and local communities, if the NYDA does not have resource and capacity to actually go into those communities. But there's definitely political will. And what we're doing in the interim as the NYDA is that we do have what we call mobile offices, where we're able to interact with young people within those communities. And even though it is sporadic, it's not a consistent interaction with young people, we do believe that there is that work that still needs to be done until such a time as the holder of the PES, who is the leader of government business, signs us a check and says, NYDA, please go flourish. So I really appreciate that comment. But also the district development model of government actually speaks to what he's saying with regards to ensuring that the National Development Plan truncates to local municipalities and local communities. And I think that's the work that the presidency has been quite passionate about. And I think what we need to do as young people is really to agitate government that although we've got a conversation going on about the DDM, the pace in which we implement and the pace in which we respond to the challenges that people in local communities face actually matters, and it is important. That we shouldn't spend too much time, having conversations in parliament, taking them through the washing machine indefinitely. We need to be able to ensure that we shorten the process so there is an immediate response. But I just want to take a bite on the question of dignity, and I really want to say that I definitely agree, and this is what you were saying that the CEO actually mentioned, that social security and safety nets actually matter in South Africa, especially at a point where a young person, you are saying they must earn 3,000 rand and they live in a very far-flung, community. How you cushion them in their immediate family matters, because instead of Karabo having to take her 3,000 rand stipend to pay for electricity, to pay for food in the family, when there is a social security safety net, that actually offsets some of the immediate costs and expenses that the families actually experience. So I really do think that the question on social security, for me, actually responds to the question of dignity and ensuring that we respond directly and immediately to the dignity of young people. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the question around access to internet, I think the bigger question is around the costs, and some discussions have been taking place in government around the possibility of regulation, and I think there were some initiatives that took place, collaboration between government and internet, and mobile companies during the pandemic to lower the costs of data, but even beyond that, to also zero rate some of the important sites that were necessary for education, for health, and all of that. So I think the big question is around, lowering the cost of data and access to data. And I think sometime last year, the Department of Communications had made some targets that they would want to see 80%, with a plan of 80% penetration in terms of internet connectivity by 2024, and we hope that that is in progress. So I fully agree with the points that you raised around the barriers that are imposed by lack of internet connectivity and all of that. But I think some of the work that is being done in government is intended to ensure that there is access. But it's also important that we take the call to the doorstep of the private sector, especially the main mobile telecoms companies, because comparatively speaking, the cost of data in our country is, almost to the point of ridiculous. There was I think last year the president announced, or at communications, there was an announcement in terms of the availability of the spectrum, and we hope that that will also have an impact on reducing the cost. There are also government-driven projects to roll out fiber, and I think those have also had a major impact, particularly in public facilities that are based in rural areas. schools, hospitals, government, public service offices, and all of that. So there is some work that is happening, in that regard. The question of dignity, I think it's been responded to. Let me not respond to that. I think it's been, the NYDA seems to have it proper. But there's an issue that was, I think, around the National Youth Service. Just a minute. We said to the student leadership that they're getting a grant to go and study for free. It covers tuition, it covers travel, accommodation, almost everything that they need in terms of support. And so we said to them that they need to start discussions. Of course, from our side, that discussion will have to happen. But they need to have a discussion in terms of how they're going to be paying it forward, because it's not free education. It's monies paid from the taxpayer that helps to contribute towards their education. And I think it will even make the National Youth Service Program much bigger if we include those students who graduate, particularly those who are benefactors of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. But I think it's a discussion which we'll have together with the NYDA and the students' formations and so on. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses, Karabo and Deputy Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, we have run out of time, unfortunately. I did have one last question to ask our panelists, but you've been saved by the bell. Before we close, there are young people that we saw earlier in the video showcasing the work of the UNDP, and I'm told that they are actually with us in the room. So I'm going to ask, I believe there's 4 of them, just going to ask them to please stand up so that we can acknowledge them and give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. So I've decided to ask the final question as we close, even though we are running out of time. And I'm going to ask that my panelists answer this question in a sentence. I think it was Professor from the Human Research Sciences Council who said that this report is not doom and gloom. While it, paints a picture of the situation, and the situation is dire, there are also interventions and ways to strengthen those interventions to make sure that our collaborative effort has the kind of impact that we need to start seeing a material change in the lives of young people. And so with that said, in your work individually, what would you say is the thing that gives you hope about the thing that gives you hope about the work that is being done to curb youth unemployment? And if you don't have any hope, I need you to find it very quickly, because we're going to end this conversation on a positive note.
Can I go first? Yes, yeah. So there is hope, and there are private corporates that are very passionate about this country, corporates that really want to see impactful change. Barloworld is one of those corporates that are really contributing in addressing the challenges that the report has shared. We have young talent pipelines where we invest in addressing the issue of skill as well as the issue of unemployment of youth, more especially qualified graduates. So we are investing a lot in apprenticeship programs, in interns, in graduates, CA trainees, because we are serious about seeing change in this country.
The level of investment that you have seen from corporates, and in particular, Barloworld. Karabo, and then Tebogo, and then we'll wrap up with the Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much. The ingenuity of young people. Young people are limitless. Young people are ready and willing to positively and progressively participate in the economic and development trajectory of South Africa.
Perfect.
I don't speak in small words. So please bear with me. there is hope in three aspects to today's conversation, because I do feel that this report has really come at an opportune time for South Africa. Because while we are a nation in crisis, we are now afforded the opportunity to rise to the level that we can look backwards and speak with pride to what we were able to do on our watch. I think another aspect is really about the importance of what this report provides is for us to just backtrack a little bit and do what we should have been doing all along, which is really putting people at the heart of the development agendas. And what that enables is for us to enable economic and social integration to the point that no one aspect supersedes the other, because they're both very valuable and significant in creating the really kind of systemic changes that we want to see in building ideal societies and harnessing the potential of young people and really stimulating the economy of South Africa and the continent at large. Because if we don't do that, if we don't allow you, Minister Zulu, to come to the table of economic conversations, we would have failed. If we don't allow for public, private, and civil society conversations to take place, we are going to fail. We are going to move from MDG to SDG to XYZ. And this is what keeps happening. It's not the inability of South Africa to respond, but do we have the willingness and the passion to really do what is required? And I say this because I spent 4 days last week with no water, no electricity, no water tanker from the municipality, and still have to rise to the occasion of national duty. I am still here. It is unacceptable, I am saying, but it is something that gives us an opportunity to rise to a standard that has never been seen before. Thirdly, and in conclusion, is what this report really does is to give us an opportunity to reconvene 5-10 years down the line, to come and really share what we have learned and what we have done. I think we should not invest further in programs and reports that tell us what is wrong. We know. What we really require, and to hand over to a generation that is going to come after us, is what we have done on our watch. And that is a really significant part of this conversation, that we should leave no one young person behind. And we should not allow civil society to be relegated as an institute that gives out soup and school shoes. We are contributing to the discourse of civil engagement. We are contributing to the capacity building of young people. And so why is it that you don't find the space to create critical engagement? I would not close a segment if I'm not controversial. And I'm going to be controversial. And I'm going to say NYS is indignant as it stands. And the reason we stopped working with the NYS program as it stands is because we could not allow for young people to participate in a program that gives you 1,500 rand. It is indignant. What indignity looks like in numbers is that it tells us, we say 15 to 24, the youth unemployment rate, but to put it into perspective, what it means is that today as we're sitting here, 10 to 14 million young people woke up with nothing to do and nowhere to go. With South Africa being unequal, it means today, tonight, someone will sleep with leftovers on the table and someone will sleep with nothing to eat. Indignity means, as we sit here today, that there is someone who will receive a salary at the end of a month and a young person who will receive 350 rands. This then tells us that this is now a time and an opportunity for us to rise to a level and a standard that the world will know that there were people like us, who were willing and daring to do what is required. Because what young people will do definitely for sure is to tell us what they think about us in ways that we will not be able to deter and speak to them when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Debogo. And I'm so glad you weren't looking at me to see me flick my hair. Because I think what you said is important, and I don't think it's controversial. I think that you've brought us into the realities of many, many young people in this country that we always need to keep at the back of our minds when we do have these conversations and engagements. And on the back of that, Minister Manamela, what gives you hope about the future of this country, but also, like the report speaks to harnessing the potential of young people?
I think firstly the report give us a level of certainty in terms of the policies that we have in place and the extent within which we've been able to implement those policies, and what is it that we need to do in order to mitigate some of the negative outcomes that resulted in the implementation of those policies. I think for me that's a very important thing. The second thing is the fact that I think there is a movement towards, well, firstly getting young people to be skilled, but also confidence towards the TVET sector, because I believe that the TVET sector is at the epicenter of skills in the country, and that's where we've been putting most of our resources for the last 10 to 15 years to change the image, to change the infrastructure, to invest in the training of lecturers and facilitators, to basically show that that's where hope is. And we are really working towards ensuring that we meet the NDP targets in terms of the TVET sector. Yes, it's 2.6 million students who should be going to that to the TVET sector. It's something that we are working on. Finally, I mean, with all the numbers that we've had today, and I think with what Deboho said and all of us about hope and all of that, it cannot get any worse. And I think that we have to mobilize all forms of resources to make sure that it does not get any worse and that it actually gets better. Thanks.
And with that, I would like to officially bring our panel discussion to a close. Thank you so much to our panelists, to our audience members for engaging with us in conversation. And I believe it was Tebogo who said this, that it's important that we don't just have the conversation here and it ends there, but that we continue engaging with one another. And that we also don't have the conversation in silos, right? Where young people have a town hall somewhere on their own, and we don't have these kinds of engagements that are intergenerational, but also where we get to express ourselves in the presence of ministers, and stakeholders from agencies such as the NYDA. I'm going to ask our very last speaker, I promise, and he's just going to be 30 seconds long. He's going to do the official closing for today's event. I please ask Mr. Gabriel Dava to please come onto the podium.
Thank you, Program Director, but you are being unfair to give me 30 seconds, but I will stick to the 30 seconds. My role is very simple. It's just to say thank you. Back home, in my home village, we say that a person who doesn't know to say thank you does not deserve respect. So in that regard, as UNDP want to continue to be respected, it's my duty to say thank you. Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Paul Mashatile, thank you very much for honoring us with your presence in this event. I believe that your presence gives the political commitment to this issue of youth unemployment. We believe that stakeholders here that are here, including UNDP, will feel supported, will feel that there is political support to the work that they are doing and to the work that they are planning to do. Honorable Minister Sizulu, our friend, Zulu, sorry, with whom we have been working, and thank you for your support, and we believe that we'll continue working together towards this objective of reducing youth unemployment. To the Minister Dlamini Zulu, who is not here with us today, who has been working with us closely as well. Zuma, I'm sorry. So, but thank you. It's but are all comrades, there is no problem. So, thank you very much. I want to thank all who stand up here to give their goodwill messages. Thank you for supporting us. I want to thank the panelists who initiate a very interesting and a very good conversation. Unfortunately, we cannot continue because if we stay here for longer, Stats SA will lock us and we're not going to go home. Thankfully, we have the Deputy SG here with us, so it's not going to lock us. I'm learning with His Excellency, the Deputy President, so I will call Deputy SG because the other is very long. I want to thank also all the technical team that helped to develop this report. Without them, we could not have reached that stage. I'm not going to name all of them because we don't have time, but they know who I'm talking about. I want to thank the team of UNDP that worked tirelessly in preparing this event and preparing the documents that we have been using today from the program, the facilities and everything. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your support. And I want to thank the program director. Program director, although you try to intimidate people, you are not intimidating at all. So thank you very much for taking us through the program smoothly, and we appreciate your support. I'm sorry if I'm missing someone, but the program director is looking at me. I will have to shorten because I was given only 30 seconds. I want to say thank you everybody for being here with us today. It shows that really the work that we are doing is important, and we believe that you will continue supporting us. We will work together through that process of addressing youth employment in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency the Deputy President, honorable guests, Minister Lindiwe Zulu, allow me to say all protocols observed. It's been a long day. And with that, we have officially launched the South African National Human Development Report. The UNDP will continue to engage all of us through their various platforms. Big thank you for your patience and just being a wonderful room of colleagues and comrades to host. But from myself, Dimpo Lecheo, thank you very much. Ngiyabonga.
of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities.